one of the things that I came in with an assumption around, and I'm just going to be personal and local about this. I thought originally one of the reasons Willow Run and Ypsilanti, before the consolidation, one of the reasons I thought they were struggling financially was because they weren't willing to vote for more money locally, right, for the things that they needed. But what I've learned is, in fact, Willow Run, which at the time had been our lowest income community in Washenaw County, they actually have always taxed themselves as high as they can for education. So I just want to say they would pass their millages, they would pass their bonds, they built that beautiful Willow Run Middle School. The community supported education.
So, good morning. Thank you for being here, and I think we're in for a really good, interesting session. Last year, the Dismantling Racism group spent time, members from there, spent time talking with community leaders about racism and the indicators and of racism in Washtenaw County. And then we decided it was time for us to bring some of those community leaders here to share their stories and their information directly with members of the church. So today we are, and the three questions that we asked the leaders were, what are the indicators or systems that contribute to racism in Washtenaw County, including housing, education, health, and criminal justice? And then what actions are being taken within the county to address those? And then the third one is, what actions can we, as either individuals or the church, be part of within the community to help to dismantle racism? So we got the reports, we shared that with the subcommittee, and then now we're ready to share those with you. And today, we're going to look at the disparities in K-12 education. And indeed, there are many. I hate to admit, because I've been part of the education system for a long time, but they're there. And I believe we have two of the best superintendents I'm going to say in the county, but probably broader than that, to share that perspective with you. We have Naomi Norman, who is the superintendent of Washtenaw ISD, which is a service agency that supports the local districts within the county. Naomi's been with the district since the mid-90s and served in, mid-90s, somewhere in there, and has served in multiple capacities, particularly in the area of instruction. And she's worked very closely with local districts around their academic issues as their partner in helping them to improve. I'll also say Naomi is extremely aware of data and how it's impacting the different students within the county. And not only the data, but she's also looked at some of the underlying situations and conditions that have contributed to that. So she brings a really broad perspective to that. And then Dr. Elaine Zachary Ross is the superintendent of Ypsilanti Community Schools. She came to lead the district in 2018, about 4 years, going on 5, and she's done a fantastic job. And Ypsilanti's community schools is the result of putting together Willow Run schools and Ypsilanti public schools about 2013. And so it certainly is a victim of many of the systemic issues around education that exist across the country, but even more across the state, and within as an exemplary of that within our county. So she came in 2018 and has been a very exemplary leader. She's known for her work in terms of turning around the schools and making a difference in staff attendance and dropout rates. She formerly was superintendent in Okemos and Muskegon Heights. And the Ypsilanti schools, just as an example of what she's starting to do, were recognized last year for with an accreditation, national accreditation recognition. So we're glad to have her here to share that specific perspective and a broader perspective from her other experiences. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Naomi and Elena to share their information with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Diane. We were able to get that quicker. Beth, were we able to receive something to advance? To advance the slides, he was going to get us that. He didn't.
Do you want somebody to click it, to move it?
I think we'll be able to get it.
Oh, I'm willing to do that.
I just want to preface at least my comments today with something, because I think it's really important, especially as a leader who's been in this county for a while. If I were doing this presentation in front of you today with, if it was 10 years ago, when I first really started digging in and working with Ypsilanti closely, the presentation would have been a presentation about student scores. It would have been a presentation about all the things we had to fix with the district. And I want to name that right now because I have grown and learned, come to love the community, in Ypsilanti in particular, but and I do love all communities in Washenaw County, I will say. But I really came to shift my thinking in terms of understanding that this is not a district or a group of people or a community that needs to be fixed, and that I don't have the answers. And I think that that's really important as someone who has spent a lot of time in Ann Arbor, to shift that thinking and to really get underneath and recognize that we have created systems are really just a bunch of people deciding how we're going to work together, right? A social system, and that's education really falls in that. And so our beliefs, our understandings, our assumptions, they all factor into the kind of policies and the rules we set up. And then those rules, based on whoever's in control of making them, right, whichever voices are loudest.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Uh-huh.
So use that microphone if you want to move it, but they can't hear that there, and I know that's important.
All right. But can you hear this? Can you, maybe, oh, here's what's happening. You need it here better, higher. Is that better? Let me see if I can. This is the problem with wearing scarves. They do. Does that work better? Okay. So I just was trying to make the point that systems are really ultimately, and social systems are made up of the people, our beliefs, our assumptions, and those of us who are advocating for various things, that how we want our systems to function and work. And when we bring those assumptions, when I bring an assumption that they're not doing a good job, they must need, and I'm bringing it from my perspective, maybe as someone who is not a member of this community, I am maybe bringing that with a set of assumptions that isn't really beneficial to the community we're trying to support. And so as we came in today's presentation, I know for me, is really thinking deeply about what are those things that we all of us, those assumptions, those beliefs that we bring into how we set up policy, how we set up funding, how we set up Washenaw County, who has access, who doesn't, and what are those underlying systemic pieces that really make it possible or impossible for leaders like Alina to do the work that she can do and does do in the amazing ways that she can, really support one of our districts. And so this idea of not thinking of Ypsilanti as a challenge, or the things that we're facing as challenges as much as opportunities to do some things differently.
So that's where we go into part of our objectives today is to shift our thinking from challenging, from deficit thinking to asset thinking, no matter where we are coming from, to just make sure that we're all on that same page of looking at asset thinking, thinking about opportunities, why you're having us all come in today, looking at this series of, okay, what can we do? Not being stuck in, okay, here's the series, and we're going through this circle of, oh my goodness, here's the challenge over and over. Yet, let's move forward to what are these opportunities and taking us out of that circle of here are the disparities over and over. Also understanding how these assumptions drive these policies, drive this funding, drive this circle of we're in this same situation, these same districts. We can predict the outcomes. When we talk about these priority schools, when we talk about partnership districts, when we talk about the top to bottom list and the scores, I can predict them 5 years down the line right now based off of the area codes and the zip codes students live in. Why is that a factor? Let's talk about that. Also, the assumptions that come from our own lived experiences. You can remember when you were a child, those assumptions from the neighbors, from our parents, from our grandparents, our own biases, our own ways of thinking. Let's challenge that as we think about the systems, not just our beliefs, but the systems that have been put in place. They're not things that we just carry on our own, but they're the systems that were set up. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And some of these county levels of examples that we talk about, what do you mean by these systems? What we're talking about, and this is what we'll address today in our short presentation, are funding, schools of choice, the affordable housing, the where and why, and staffing at YCS in particular. And so Naomi's going to get started with funding. You can go to the next slide here.
So I wanted to talk about funding to make sure that we all understood kind of the different ways funding comes in to support school districts in Michigan. And putting a little context to this, the different needs that we might have in our districts based on where we have particular student needs. So we talk often about what does it mean financially to be economically disadvantaged. That's one of the ways that we happen to measure and code students in Michigan. And so I put up here a quick chart just giving you as a reminder of the Washenaw County districts, and I put some of them on here. If we look at students and economically, whether they fall into this economically disadvantaged category, you'll see like in Dexter has the least with about 8% of their students, and then kind of moves through with Ypsilanti. It's probably different because this was a couple years ago, but 74%. And so I just wanted that as a little bit of a backdrop, because then as we look at where does the funding come, because some of it is tied to those numbers, we have a standard money that comes from the state. Every school district gets a certain amount of money from the state, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. We get federal and state at-risk and title funds, it's called. That follows some of the economically disadvantaged students. We get grants, state, federal, from private organizations, philanthropy, and then locally, bonds, millages, or county millages. And then there is actually the money that can come through families, just directly funding something, and other community organizations. So if we go forward, just to say a little tiny bit more, can we jump? What is it going now? And I'm weaving this in so that we can. All school districts in Michigan now get this $9,150 per student. I was talking to a colleague of mine in a different state, and her foundation allowance, or her set amount, is $23,000 per student. That was from Albany, New York. And I just say that because I want to, and I don't know that New York has the same funding formula, but that's what she was working with when she was doing her programming. And there are some districts actually in Michigan that have some other numbers. But I just wanted to name that because $9,150, while equal across the state, is certainly not enough to cover the costs of an education. We also have the at-risk and title funds. Those follow students based on income and need. So a district that has more students that fall into that low income category will receive additional title funds, more money to support specific needs. I wanted to make a point, though, about that money, because you're like, okay, you get extra money, right? Yay, this is awesome. And it is, it's wonderful. But it comes with a lot of additional rules, accountability, and I was trying to think about it from like if you had a home budget and you need, $3,000 a month to make it, and you get $1,500 a month or $2,000 a month, that's pretty flexible. You can use it however you need to use it. And then the other $1,000 a month, someone outside of your family is saying to you, you can only use it on, you can use it to help pay your rent, but you can't use it for food, you can't use it for any sports activities for your kids, they put a lot of restraints, which is important from the federal government standpoint, but when you think about it from a local standpoint, there's some constraints that end up coming into play that are significant. The other thing I wanted to mention is if a district is in debt, they do have the ability to borrow money from the state and then pay it back. So if something happens this year and you can't afford, you need a little bit of extra money to make it through as a district, there's a process by which you can go to the state and say, we have to borrow money for this year, we'll adjust our budget for next year and pay you back. And then the other point I wanted to make was with the funding, with the title funds, which is a little different than like the foundation allowance, if you don't spend it within the time frame, it goes away. So it's not money that you could say, oh, we're going to take care of something next year. You might get a new allocation, but anything unspent is not money that you'll have.
So how does this relate to YCS? Like why is she saying this? How does this pertain to us? What does this have to do with this? Well, yes, everybody in the state gets $9,150 per student. Yet the district in which we're sitting in Ann Arbor, is whole harmless. So if you live in this district years ago in 1995, when you guys were given extra money as taxpayers, you still give that extra money. So they get $9,150 plus the taxpayers' money because you're able to give. So they can still give more money for salaries. They still get more. It is still not equitable. So no, they are able to give more money per student. Yes, this at-risk money, we do get at-risk money. We're still, again, having to give more. Just because, again, that whole home amount of $3,000, we have to give more, but it costs way more than they're giving us. To educate that is way more than 74% of our students. Yes, it's an average of 74%. That means that when they're looking at the income of our students, overall 74%, that's including our Y-High students. That's including the students who go to our IB schools. That's including the students who are homeless they're not counted because they don't turn in the application for free and reduced lunches. And so that's really not saying those students who have the most and greatest need. And so those aren't accounted for all of the money that we need to spend out. And when they're talking about that accountability for saying they give us for all of that money, we have to count up. We have to give receipts. We have to count for every single thing that we spend on. And so I almost sometimes say, don't give it to me. Because if you wanted me to count for every single dollar and all the time, all those people have to give time slips. What am I doing? Some of you said you taught for 30 years. You know. They want to know what kind of meetings they had. Give me the agenda. Give me the time in. It costs more money to account for it than to get it. And so this money, this at risk, sometimes is not even worth the dollars because those other folks can have a meeting and not even say what happened for it. But the rules are sometimes so strict that it's not worth the funds, but we want to give every dollar we can get. We want to give it to the students as much as possible. And then the indebtedness. We know that the tax amount, and she's going to talk about that a little bit later, but this is where it comes into account here. This is where it matches here, because it impacts our operational expenses. For example, our Willow Run taxes, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but it impacts here. When we collect the taxes, we don't receive enough to even pay off the debt. So where does it impact? We're going to talk about how much it is later, but this is where we're talking about. We have to borrow money to pay off the debt. We don't even collect enough. And so where does it hit? It hits our students because we don't collect enough taxes. And so it has to be, you have to pay the debt somewhere. And so here it is. We have to borrow right here every year. So we never get out. We never get out of debt because we don't collect enough taxes. And you'll see the numbers later. And so, again, we spend our Title $1. It's not that for us. We spend it every year. We can accept more. When people ask about the ESSER funds and, are people on time? I'm like, we've been paying off debt. Let me tell you, there was different debts. We've been paying off. We can take other people's ESSER funds. Because we're not going to be on a cliff and all that all those other people talk about, because we had enough debt, we have enough things to pay for that we can, if anybody else has ESSER funds, we'll use that too. Because we have listened to our community, and the number one thing they said was pay off debt. And so there was different operational debts. We had Schneider Electric. We had a whole bunch of operational pieces of debt that we used, because we're like, how are we going to ask the community to help us to advocate to pay off debt when we got these big one-time pieces of funds and we're not being financially responsible? And so we use our ESSER funds partly to help pay off debt so that we can pay the teachers. We want to have a contract that's competitive. And so we have used our funds so that we can spend the money right where it impacts students, on our staff. That's the closest to our students as possible. So this impacts us so much. It hits us right where our students are. Because over 85% of our operational costs are our staff. And our staff means so much. That's what impacts our scores. It's because they are what we need to invest in.
So we also have the county and the local. Can you go back one, maybe? The arrows, maybe. It's all right. You can see where we're going. Maybe we'll move back and forth between these two slides. We have the ability to go for bonds. There you go. Yep, and local and county. So bonds and millages. So a bond is where we go and we say, we want to build a school. Will you help us pay back the money we're going to have to borrow to build this school? The other way to think, the other thing we can do is go for a millage. And a millage would pay for, on an ongoing basis, whatever it is that, on an operational basis, we just want to keep paying for. A great example of a millage in Washenaw County, if we look at the county level, would be for special education. So we have voted as Washenaw County to put a set amount of money into paying for special education costs. That's just all of our special education costs on an ongoing basis for the length of the millage term. So we have the state and federal money, but we do have a significant amount of money that we can request of voters locally. We also have the ability to go for grants. And there's a number of grants, and I know there's a lot that you could talk about that you're doing specifically. I'll let you do that. And then we also have locally families, local organizations. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations and other groups that do tremendous amount of support for all of our districts. And then county government, they also received a lot of money through the ARP, the American Rescue Funds, after and during COVID, as well as a number of, they're just a regular operational budget. They have the ability to say, there's a priority, we'd like to help fund this thing related to kids in this district or across the county. And I'll just mention at the county level, for example, our county commissioners did decide to start a new childhood savings account program so that every child in Washenaw County would have a savings account started for when they want to go to college or earn their career certificates. And that would come into play in like kindergarten or first grade. And they are putting a significant amount of money so that every child could have that start. And the county has made a priority to support, again, the students who are economically disadvantaged. So the students who are economically disadvantaged would get a larger start in that childhood savings account. So that's an example of where the county could come in and provide additional support. I don't know if you want to talk about this or if we should go to the next slide. Go to the next slide so we can talk about this a little bit more. One of the things that I came in with an assumption around, and I'm just going to be personal and local about this. I thought originally one of the reasons Willow Run and Ypsilanti, before the consolidation, one of the reasons I thought they were struggling financially was because they weren't willing to vote for more money locally, right, for the things that they needed. But what I've learned is, in fact, Willow Run, which at the time had been our lowest income community in Washtenaw County, they actually have always taxed themselves as high as they can for education. So I just want to say they would pass their millages, they would pass their bonds, they built that beautiful Willow Run Middle School. The community supported education. And I put this up here to just give an example. This is more currently of property tax rates. And I just wanted to point out that like Ypsilanti City, if you live there, you're paying 67 mills. And a mill is a mill is kind of how we decide when we go to voters, how many mills do we want to put in. It's $1 for every $100 of property value. And so that's how we calculate, right, our property taxes. And so you'll see, like, even now, the Ypsilanti district, they're willing to tax themselves. They get to these numbers by how they're willing to tax themselves, and they're very high. And actually, everybody on this list is pretty high. If you look, I grabbed this because it had Ann Arbor and Ypsi Township and Ypsi City in it. But as I look at, like, other townships in Washtenaw County and throughout the state, the numbers are typically around 30, 32. We just happen to tax higher in our area because we choose to do that. So I want to talk briefly, and then I'll let you jump in. So what happens if you pass a millage or a bond and you say, we're agreeing we're going to put 1 mill toward this bond for the next period of time? It all works out great because we calculate those numbers when we build a building or when we calculate what we're going to be getting for our special ed costs. And we plan for that. So we know that 1 mill in Washtenaw County, if I look at the whole county, 1 mill brings in $20 million a year, just to give you an example. Each district, 1 mill, they would multiply it by their property value, right? And it would bring in a set amount of money. Then you would take that amount of money and say to yourselves, we know that we can pretty much count on that amount of money for the length of the bond, whatever it is we told voters. So it's going to take 10 years to pay this off. We've asked for 1 mill. We multiply that out by 10 years. We know how much money we can bring in, which drives how much we can spend on the building. So Willow Run was very responsible. They did all of that planning. They built a building. And recession happens. And houses lose value. Or businesses leave a community, because it includes businesses too, right? And then what happens is the amount of money you're bringing in each year is less than what that bond payment is. And it could be less by a little, but what happens then? How do you pay the bond payment? So what they do, there's two things they do, and Ypsilanti is not unique in this situation. This happened to Whitmore Lake, it happened to Milan. The first thing that happens is the state, without going to the voters, increases the millage rate to pull in extra money. But they're capped on how much they can increase the millage rate without going to vote. So then, if they can't meet the payment that way, they're like, oh well, okay. Instead of being 10-year bond, instead of having homeowners pay for 10 years, let's change it to 13 years. We'll get our money back that way. Or 15 years. Or 80 years. It's my understanding that some of the Willow Run community has bond payment things that have multiplied for many, many years. But that impacts then the district, right? So that's on the bond.
So she talked about quite a few bonds and grants. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, because I don't want it to be taken for granted about the special ed millage that she talked about. We serve a very vulnerable population in this county in a wonderful way. And so if you have not been out there to look at the new building, the facilities, how we care for our most vulnerable, our most needy. And I'm in a church, and so I can just talk about how our responsibility as a community to serve them in the most loving way. And the way that we do that is how we serve them daily, where they go, where they spend their most time. That building shows our love. It gives them a place where they feel valued, where they can be educated, where they can just see that they are cared for. And please take time to go there. And so it is a beautiful facility, and our community, our entire community, through our funds, built that building, and it's because of you. So thank you for that, and the way that they're served daily through the educational programs, and that millage is not taken for granted by any of the locals. All of the locals talk about it because it's not in every community. Every community does not fund special education the way Washenaw County does. So that millage.
High Point.
High Point. I was going to say Honey Creek because Honey Creek and High Point.
In that building. Uh-huh.
High Point, and it's located there right behind the Washenaw Intermediate School District. And it is absolutely beautiful. It's for our special ed population, our multiple impairments, and it is new because of the millage. And before it was an older building. Students couldn't get around in wheelchairs. There are therapy pools. There's trails for students based off of needs. It is beautiful. There are ways that they can actually perform if you have a wheelchair or different disabilities. And so, yes. And so that alone, and it serves students throughout the whole county. And so we don't want to take that for granted. So we have to pause because students from the east side of the county, west side, the whole county benefits. And so sometimes we talk about the inequities and we don't pause to talk about how some of the things that we do are working. And that's one thing that is working that we ought to be proud about.
And I'm going to just add,
yeah, absolutely. Yes. How many students are there?
That school serves about 75 students with significant multiple impairments. The millage itself,
yes,
that serves all students with special needs in all districts in Washtenaw County. So we reimburse, the ISD reimburses the Ypsilanti Community Schools for their special education costs, which helps their district because then they don't have to be using their regular funds to do that. And that is due to passing a millage throughout Washenaw County, specifically to support our students with special needs.
And also, Ms. Alves, it helps us to also prevent students from having to have needs as well, because we're able to be proactive with multi-tier systems of support. That millage is imperative for Ypsilanti Community School students, truly. We start working with them 0 to 3. It is, I'm telling you, that is something that your investment is crucial to our students in this county. Crucial. It prevents students from having needs, and those that are in needs get services. We have students on the bus with nurses who literally, if they didn't have those nurses, they would not even survive. They are on trachs on the bus. They would not be able to get out of their homes. They would be isolated to their homes if they didn't have those services. It is amazing what that millage does. So I just wanted to thank you for that. Secondly, those other grants, the mental health services, we know that students have been in need. This pandemic has done something that I've never seen. I know that COVID is one thing, but I really think that there is some research that has to be done about the mental health that has been coupled with it. And I've never seen some things that has happened along the mental health pieces that has not just been with students, but also with staff. We had, unfortunately, we lost a staff member to suicide last year. So it's not, and parents, families, we've been doing compassion resilience circles, not only with families, but also with staff members. The mental health millage and the work that has happened with Washenaw County, they've been in our buildings. We've had 31N social workers, in addition to our special ed social workers and 31A social workers in our buildings. That work has been amazing, and we need even more. We need more support. We've got nurses. One other piece we have is we have 3 nurses in our district who do testing, COVID testing. They do COVID education every single day. And so that has been really helpful to remove that work off of our nurses, to make sure they also get caught up on they didn't get immunizations and things like that, other things that they needed while we were out of school those 2 years. So all of that has been super helpful. And then with these physical needs, we talked about all of the other bonds, but Ypsilanti, when I got there, we had not ever had a sinking fund. So you look at our buildings and you say, wow, the bond is one thing, but we hadn't had sinking funds, so there hadn't been painting done. There hadn't been some basic needs in the district. So our teachers, we're finally able to just change up lighting to be able to be more efficient, to paint, to do some of we're redoing the pool. So people keep saying, why is the high school pool not being used? We are finally able to do some of the things that just the basic maintenance that hadn't been done in years. We thank goodness to our community, we're finally able to pass a sinking fund based off of the support for the community. So these kinds of things, it sounds like, okay, they're just numbers, but they mean so much to the day-to-day operational needs for our students. So this is why we're talking about it, because it translates to how our students can be serviced. We're going to be able to finally do something. We're called AC Tech, the arts, but we don't have a functioning arts place for our students to do work because there had not been the investment. So with the sinking fund, we're going to be able to do that. So again, these programs, what our students have access to is directly related to these kind of dollars, but you see the inequities. You see the inequities, and this is why we're bringing it to your attention, because when we talk about the systematic challenges, although the taxpayers are willing to pay, these kind of things impact what our students have access to.
All right. So I think what I like about where you just went, because we talked about, as we thought about this, we wanted to lay out the things that are the realities of the way the funding works, but we also wanted to lift up the opportunity in what we have here. So I'm appreciating right now, because you are making one of the really important points, which is when we come together as a county, like with our special ed funds, with our mental health millage, then we're able to redistribute the funds wherever the needs are most. And that's a really important thing for all of us to understand. And then the power of the vote at the community level to make a change in our schools. I don't know if you want to mention any of these things, or if we made those points already.
I think this just highlights, just summarizes what we just talked about, that this debt, the consolidation debt, really impacts this operational piece and why we aren't able to be competitive with our staff payment. It really hits the opportunities for our students, why we don't have some of the sports and the music and the theater programs. The millage rate doesn't cover our bond costs. So we pay, again, out of our operational costs. And so that rate went up without the voters being able to vote. That, I can't, how do you believe that? How these voters, that just to me is an outrage. And it extended the length of time. The one thing to know, we have been advocating though, and Senator Irwin was by our side. We have, since I've been there, just in 4 years, we've decreased that rate twice. We refinance. We are advocating always at the state. People talk about me all the time. I will go and advocate and yell, and sometimes people say, "My goodness, she is so aggressive." I don't mind. I don't mind people talking about me because I'm advocating on behalf of the students at YCS. I'm not here to try to be making friends. I am here. I am here for the success of the students in Ypsilanti Community Schools. They have suffered too long. They don't have another year. They got this year. This is life or death. And so I don't need to be sitting around quiet. I need to be making a change for these students. So this kind of inequity is not okay. And if I don't yell now, then what's going to happen? We're going to have another year of this? It's not okay. And so these constraints with the funding, I want the funding, but I don't want the constraints. I want us to be able to put the money where we need it and put it there immediately so that the students that we're serving right now, because this homeless population, I have transiency. I might not see these students next year. And so they need it right now while they're in my face, while they have the teacher, because the teacher might go too. I need them because they are trained, they are excellent, because a lot of them go and they get Teacher of the Year in these other districts that I can pay them. So I need the most trained that's in front of them, and I need them to get what they need right then, right when we have them. And so it's our job to tell the story and to get these students what they need.
And right now, there is funding for consolidation, if it were happening now, that would cover the debt when we consolidate. And we're asking that they go back and cover the debt of other districts that have consolidated in the last 10 years, which would impact potentially Ypsilanti Community Schools. So there is a pathway to addressing that need. And then for the millage rates, this is a problem throughout Michigan. For any lower, where the property values and the business values are lower, any community in Michigan. So we use Ypsilanti as an example, but we could point to any other community, including very rural communities. They can't raise enough money to improve their facilities. So there is currently a study being done to look at doing what most other states do, which is having the investment come from the state to ensure from an equity standpoint that if you can't cover those costs through your local dollars, that there is a way through a state pool of funds to help make sure that every single school building in Michigan is of the quality that our kids deserve. So these two things are solvable. It's about the will of the people to do that. All right, we've talked enough about money. Yes, and the consolidation in Ypsilanti lifted up the needs for any district that's consolidating, and they've changed the rules around it now. So that's great. We just haven't really benefited locally. So we're going to switch gears for just a moment and talk about schools of choice. This is a really important policy that we have, and that's has been since 1996. In Washenaw County, and this is from a year ago, we have around 44,000 students, and I'm highlighting the two districts just for comparison right now. Ypsilanti has around 3,500 students, Ann Arbor has around 18,000 students. Go to the next slide. Those and that map showed our two districts. So I just want to do a little comparison to help understand one of these, the dynamics that's at play. And that dynamic is families have options if a district allows school of choice to apply and attend school in a different district. It happens during a particular window of the year. And all over Michigan, it's a very competitive time as people are encouraging students to choose their district. Because remember, the funding follows. That $9,000 follows the student. It doesn't stay with the district, it follows the student wherever they go. At the same time, we added, in 1996, this ability for charter schools to be started. And charter schools are also considered public school districts. They're independent schools, typically. They're not like a district, they're a school. And they can then recruit students from the different communities. And so I just wanted to show the impact of school of choice. Just to give you an example, for example, in Ann Arbor, 2,200 students choose to come into Ann Arbor through school of choice, and they only opened their school choice window in the last few years. And then about 1,300 enroll elsewhere. And that enroll elsewhere, so they live in Ann Arbor, somewhere within the Ann Arbor School District. And what I show here is that 96 of the students that year chose to go to Saline. I picked the top here. And then they chose to go to these many charter schools. And the charter schools, just so you have a sense, WTMC has 223, Central Academy, also located in Ann Arbor, 192, South Arbor, Honey Creek is also located in Ann Arbor, and then Fortis Academy. If we look at Ypsilanti, so let's jump over here, we have 283 students this particular year that choiced into the district, and 4,287 that enrolled elsewhere. Where did they go? Well, as soon as Ann Arbor opened, a large number slid over to Ann Arbor, so over 1,000 of the students go to Ann Arbor, 300 to Lincoln, but really it's the charter schools where many of the students in Ypsilanti choose to go. Fortis Academy has 442, South Point, Central Academy, Global Tech, East Arbor. And one of the patterns that I've noticed, I didn't have time to put this together, but if you drew the district boundaries and you dropped charter schools within those boundaries, typically, not in every case, but the pattern is that the families choose charter schools that are close or within their community. They're not driving 30 miles for a charter school in most cases. And Ypsilanti has actually had the bulk of the charter schools in Washenaw County have been in the Ypsilanti catchment area. So it has an impact on the district's enrollment. And if you just notice, so 4,200 enrolling elsewhere, and if you jump back a slide, can you go backwards? I just wanted to show, so with about 30, you got to go back, yeah, one more. With an enrollment of 3,500, now if you go forward, and then 4,200 or so, the number of students who actually live in Ypsilanti is in the 7,500 or 8,000 range. I just wanted to make that clear because Ypsilanti, in terms of the area, is actually our second largest district in terms of numbers of students. And that this, the way we've set up this school choice really does create, and this is, it creates a winner and loser amongst districts. because we have most of our districts don't have any charter schools within them. So they aren't even dealing with that competition.
And we saw this really happen in 2013 when the merger happened. We understand that people were concerned. They didn't know what was going to happen when Ypsilanti and Willow Run came together. Unfortunately, it was around the same time when charters were coming to the area, and so it was a terrible storm for the community. And so now we have seen more students. We've had about 80 more students come to the district over the since I've been there. Yet this is a true impact because, of course, it's the funding comes with the students. And so we have now 4,287 students, which impacts what kind of programs, what kind of operational things. It impacts, can we have an AP teacher for our students? We can't have an AP teacher for 5 students, 3 students. And so this number truly is impactful for students, not for the district in general, but it really gets down to the individual student. And the charters do make a difference.
Yep. All right, so just wanted to make that point about how that plays. Let's talk a little bit about, we called this affordable housing, but this really speaks to, no, it doesn't have is there another slide after this or no? This is right. Yeah, let's talk about this just briefly. I don't know. We wanted to capture the spirit of what across Washenaw County, that we have a challenge, right, when we think about things like housing, food insecurity, the number of people who are dealing with food insecurity, for example, in our county, and it has risen significantly since the pandemic. We have a little data there.
Yeah, and we think about that it's just in pockets, but it has spread. It has spread and it impacts, I think it was on the next slide, where people are able to live, where people are able to work, what people are able to do. We saw during the pandemic where our parents, if you go to, I think it is on the next slide, where our parents, oh no, I don't know where it went, where our parents were able to work. Our parents had to go out. Routes for busing were limited to where they were able to even have access to jobs. And so they had to choose jobs within certain routes. And so food insecurity was a big situation for them. And so it started actually closing in on opportunities versus opening up opportunities for them. And so the reality for our county, instead of we think, oh, ARPA funds came and things happened, this might have given them opportunity. It really started limiting what people had in their mind as their opportunities for work, for school. And we said, oh no, the governor gave these opportunities for you to go to school. And people started saying, no, their self-efficacy and the beliefs of what they could do, instead of thinking about being open, they started thinking of limitations in terms of, now the joke about the cost of eggs, if you think about how it has impacted all of us, it's really tremendously multiplied for these families who now see themselves with the outcome of a lower income, the outcome of they're not protected with evictions anymore. They're not protected with job stabilities. And so now when you're talking about these persons who are just above, they might have gotten a job that was $18 an hour, but now they're in this ALICE, the asset limited income constrained employees, and the numbers that have gone up, well, they're in a situation where they're just above. If their car has broken down, if the bus route doesn't work, they're in a situation that they are feeling more anxiety. They're in a situation where they're impacted with these barriers that seem insurmountable. And that's, I think, where we're really trying to make sure you're seeing and where the housing market is right now.
And I know that you have planned, you'll hear about the Opportunity Index, which is a data system in Washenaw County that's scheduled for February for a presentation here with this group. But if you can imagine a map of Washenaw County and you think about where is opportunity, and that is defined by jobs, it's defined by access to transportation, easy access, right, to the bus systems. It's defined by access to education. It's defined by the economic and housing opportunity. In Washenaw County, the most opportunity, the darkest, richest color on the map, in one color, is right where we are right now. It basically centers around this part of Ann Arbor and a little bit north. If you look at where the opportunity and the challenges are the greatest, so the darkest in terms of the challenges and the least opportunity, it really centers around the city of Ypsilanti. There's a couple pockets going north toward Whitmore Lake, and a little bit in Manchester. But I think it just to acknowledge and to recognize that geography in our county and policies and how we set up a lot of different things, and we were going to talk a little more about housing, but I know time is tight, and housing opportunities, it has an impact, and it is geographically bound and different by community. And it creates a different situation for the YCS district.
And we're going to just skip on to just
let's go to the, keep going.
Keep going.
Yep. We can go here. Do you want to talk about this?
We'll just talk about, that's why staffing becomes an issue, because
Yep. This is our last point.
Just the last, because of all those factors, we are really saying that we need this equitable funding, because we've had, for the last 3 out of the 4 years I've had, the Teacher of the Year for the county. We had the Staff Member of the Year for Michigan Department of Education. I mean, we produce the quality staffing, but we lose it to other districts. We bring professional development that the entire state use. And now we end up with people who have lack of experience, but we then produce those who have the best. But again, because of our structure of our collective bargaining unit, we can't keep them. So that's all. But I wanted to share, go ahead with the next. In spite of our discipline data, we didn't have any expulsions. The last 2 years, we had one this year that was a mandatory expulsion. We received Cognia, which is the system of accreditation. It used to be North Central. For the entire nation, they only gave 39 systems of distinction. We received the only system of distinction. No other one in Michigan. It's a third-party accreditation because of our systems that have been put in place over the last 3 years. We were the only one in Michigan, and only 39 internationally, not even in the United States, internationally. We received over $30 million in grants. We are that good of grant writers, $30 million in 2 years. We have been innovative. We've brought in a dual immersion program because we have so many students who are coming in with different languages. We brought 2 newcomer centers to support our families who are coming in from different countries. We are one of the only districts in Michigan who have the only Michigan seal, which is the seal of biliteracy. That means they leave out speaking fluently, at least being biliterate. Our graduation rates, we're over 80% at the high school. Last year for our STEM middle college, we had 100% graduation rate, 100%. We have a teacher leadership and rising leaders program, which is a para to teacher program, a teacher to principal, and a principal to central office program where we are growing our own. We received the state of Michigan and the AASA, which is the Superintendent's Association Beyond the Classroom Award nationally. I was just published Tuesday in the U.S. Department of Education publication, monthly publication, and we are noted in the Michigan Department of Civil Rights equity plan. I'm the only superintendent noted, and we, again, are noted for our systems. Our deep equity work around excellence is noted. Across the state, we are bringing student voice and choice and agency for every student. And you'll see our culture of belonging. When we talk about Stronger Together, it is not just saying it, you'll see it everywhere through our restorative practices and daily practices. So although you hear this story, I don't want you to think, oh, YCS is just this struggling place. It is a place that now we are really proud to talk about, that it is truly an international system of distinction because of the systems. We need to break down these barriers so that the students can continue to succeed and our staff can be proud to be paid equitably, and our community, our whole Washenaw community, can be seen as this entire educational community of excellence without this one piece that is lagging us down. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
I'd like to ask particularly, how can we help continue and to support the changes and the opportunities in my field?
Oh, you want you to.
Oh, yes, please. In order to continue to support us, number one, advocate. There are some ways right now, some policies about the consolidated grants that are out there that we want the governor to put on that bill to change, that we can go back for the consolidated schools to include YCS on there. That will be wonderful for districts who aren't receiving enough funds, and when they collect their taxes, to include that in her budget. We want to do that. We also always need people to come in to support. Now that the pandemic has opened up doors again, I know when I first came in, all of a sudden the pandemic happened and closed doors. We have right now the methods courses for Eastern are in our building. So we have people, they're in Estabrook every day. We've got that closer partnership. We need people in our building to support our students and teachers. And so coming in to do that, we always need support for funding things. We just put $100,000 in classroom libraries to have diverse books, but there's always need for more diverse classroom libraries. So supporting our students around literacy and numeracy. We put a lot in literacy, but if you have ways to support students in numeracy has been a big lagging piece with us. We have a LEAP grant that we've been putting in for 5 years. We've got several million dollars for that, but we're really struggling in the area of mathematics, so we need that support. During the summer, we have Grizzly Learning Camp. We have people coming in, bringing their expertise in those camps. So if you have ideas of ways to come in for that Grizzly Learning Camp, or if your job or your previous jobs have those internship or externship experiences, or if you know ways of giving experiences to our students, that's always something, because that's one of the pieces. Our students don't get a chance to go out and have experiences. Or if you can just call me and say, hey, I've got some great ideas. I'm always looking to learn, because I just learned about a community service experience that maybe I don't know about. I'm coming back to the community. I haven't been here since 2011. And so sometimes it's just not knowing. And I need to make sure that I'm informed. And just you giving me information is sometimes the best way to help our students. I don't know if Naomi, you have some suggestions?
I would just encourage too to understand from a funding standpoint how important it is to support our county-wide efforts, because we are leaning in always to where the needs are most needed. So any county-wide millage, anything like that is all about supporting the kids who need it most in Washenaw County, and encourage you at the state level to continue to press on our policies from an equity lens.
Is there current legislation, or our local legislators, are they promoting any policies at this time to increase funding for the programs that you mentioned and the areas in which you specifically need money? Are they advocating for changes in some of the current policies that would allow you to spend more money in the areas that you need to?
They're focused on that consolidation piece. I know that's the one.
Yes, I would say that, and we have a whole new set of legislators representing our county. So we're going to be, they're brand new, they're just starting, so we have a lot of work there.
Educating.
We're going to be doing a lot of work with them. The county commissioners who are elected have taken a deep dive into what it means to really support around equitable activities and policies, and it's pretty impressive what they've been doing.
Yeah, they sat and listened to, I know I've been sharing about our debt, just really spent time as soon as they got elected.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I have a question about the money following the student. So I was a teacher in Ypsilanti. With all due respect, I went through that whole consolidation. It was a nightmare. And not only for the staff, but for the children. Secondly, when you talk about the money following the students, my experience with IPSI was that parents would take their kids to the charter schools. The charter schools will end up with getting the money for the student. The charter school runs by a different set of rules. They don't have to provide the special ed services. So for one, Ypsilanti would have to provide the special ed services but get absolutely no money for that. And not only that, the charter school could kick out students because they didn't like the way they behaved. They come back to Ypsilanti, the money did not follow the student. So how does that, is that going to change or?
So the money follows the student on count day. So if you're in wherever you are on count day, that's the place where the money goes. The charter schools are required to provide the special education services, although the your point about maybe students don't stay in a school if they aren't getting their needs fully met and they come back to districts, that's definitely a pattern. And the districts definitely are taking responsibility for many of the the kids with real significant needs. That is definitely a higher cost on that side.
Money to go back with the student?
That would be a legislative change. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to think about funding in more equitable ways, for sure.
Like not property taxes being the source of the school funding.
Well, we've shifted. Yeah, we've shifted there quite a bit. Now we just have to go to take the next step. The fact that we all have this base foundation amount of $9,150 is a big deal for Michigan because we just hit that number. 1996, we said we were going to work toward it, and we hit it in 2021. Took that many years to get everybody to the same level. Mm-hmm.
So, do you have an explanation for why so many students have left the Ypsilanti district to go to the charter schools?
Most of them left in 2013. They weren't here since the consolidation. So they didn't come to Ypsilanti Community School. It was about, 3,000 that did not come to Ypsilanti Community Schools. The really big player in the consolidation was the other districts opening up their school choice options. And that really... And then the charter. And once you start, so if you look at the data really carefully, once you start in kindergarten somewhere, you're pretty likely to stay there. So what's not happening is like, they'll leave and then they'll stay wherever they are. So it's not like they're leaving 1 year, coming back the next year, leaving 1 year, coming back. So you lose them for the 12 years. So I think this point, right. If you follow the kindergartners that left in 2013, they're probably, middle school now? Yeah, so since I've been there, there's been an increase every year. There's not been a decrease. There's been, since the 2013, those students have not come to Ypsilanti Community School. And we're trying to get those persons to come. I think it's also important. Or they've chosen not to even enter into Ypsilanti Community Schools when they had a choice. So when those students When they had a choice to come to school, they never came. They didn't leave from Ypsilanti community schools. They chose to go into charter.
So often it's about perception and not experience.
A long time for people's perceptions of a situation to change. And I think there was a lot of bad feelings about the consolidation, and it takes many years for that to change, I think. People's perception of that.
In the data collection process, charter schools located in Ypsi and other low-performing districts academically, are those students performing above the regular school district in that city or in that location, or is there any data showing the results of charter schools or school of choice?
Can you kind of repeat the question as you answer?
Now we're getting into some deeper data dives. The number one predictor of student performance on the state standardized tests is income. So regardless of whether you're in Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti or a charter school, that's going to be a strong correlation. So we're not, and yeah.
Well, what's really interesting is, let me give you the comparison. People often talk about, for example, our students who go to Y-High, who've gone through all of Ypsilanti Community Schools and graduate with all of their counterparts. And so we track that same data, the same students, and they're doing it just as well. And so it's not a predictor that they went through Ypsilanti Community Schools or they went through any other schools. It's the difference between, again, the income and other pieces. And so we also see students who transferred and that their scores are still correlated. What we do see is a lot of the students, when you look at that number, the students who have stayed, and that's where some of the pieces, they've gone to 5 different districts. They've had we have the highest number of homelessness. They've lived in several homes. Those students are the ones who a lot of our data is based on. And so our current school data. And so when you're looking at that, that's not the comparable data of what our teachers are dealing with. And so that's the challenge that our teachers sometimes say, you know, my evaluation is based off of this, and my class list isn't the same from September to June. How are you evaluating me off of this data? And so when you compare them to the data of the students that they started with, the growth is amazing. When you compare the students who started with the same students who ended, the growth is amazing, and the scholarships and all the same things that you see. And so you think about, yes, the Y-High students who mostly are YCS students.
More than half.
More than half, but people don't want to say anything about it. And so it's amazing the concept that people don't want to talk about. But the data is the data. And it's what our teachers have done. It's amazing.